You probably heard this thing about Sanskrit, right? That it has a free word order. The idea is that you can shuffle words around like a set of linguistic Legos, and the sentence still makes perfect sense. But is that really true? Today, we're diving into some fascinating research to uncover the hidden rules that govern this incredible language.
All right, let's put this idea to the test. Take a super simple sentence. Rama goes to a village. You can shuffle those words into all 6 possible orders, and yeah, they all work. The emphasis might shift a little, but the core meaning stays exactly the same. But now, let's try a slightly more complex thought. Rama goes to school after drinking milk. You just move a couple of words around, and suddenly it turns into complete and utter gibberish.
And this gets us right to the heart of the puzzle, doesn't it? If the word order isn't just a total free-for-all, there must be some kind of underlying rules. So what are they? Just how free is Sanskrit's free word order really?
Well, to answer that, we actually have to go way back in time. It turns out the key lies in these brilliant ancient Indian grammatical theories that laid out exactly what a sentence needs to be understood.
Okay, first up is a concept called akanksha, which you can think of as expectancy. Now, this isn't a psychological thing like a word is feeling curious. It's a hardcore grammatical requirement. A word has this kind of syntactic hunger for other words to complete its meaning. So a verb like brings is just hanging there, hungry for a subject who's doing the bringing and an object that's being brought. Without them, it's just incomplete. But for that hunger to be satisfied, you need a second key ingredient, sannidhi, or proximity. This rule says that words that are grammatically hungry for each other need to be close enough to actually connect. You can't just stick a bunch of unrelated words in between and expect them to magically find their partners across the sentence.
And here is a classic, fantastic example of what happens when you violate sannidhiya. I mean, this sentence is a total train wreck. Hill is expecting fiery, and Eaton is expecting by Devadatta. But because they're all scrambled up, the sentence completely fails to produce what the ancient grammarians called verbal cognition. You're just left with 2 tangled, nonsensical half-ideas.
Now, what's absolutely amazing is that we can now use modern computational tools to visualize these ancient rules. We can literally draw a blueprint of a sentence to see how it works.
We'll start with a nice, clean, correct sentence as our baseline, Shweta Ashva Davati, which simply means white horse runs. It's simple, it works, everyone understands it.
So when we draw the connections between these words, what linguists call dependency links, something really cool becomes clear. The adjective white depends on the noun horse, and horse depends on the verb runs. See how the lines are clean? They're untangled, they don't cross each other. In linguistics, this is called a planar graph. It's orderly.
Okay, now let's go back to our jumbled mess from the beginning. Rama to school, milk goes drinking. We know it feels wrong, but now we're going to see why it's wrong with a picture.
And this just illustrates the problem perfectly. When we try to draw the dependencies, the lines get all crossed up. The connection between milk and drinking has to literally jump over the verb goes. It creates a non-planar mess. This is a perfect visual of what a Sanandhi violation actually looks like.
So here's the crucial point. This modern computational concept of planarity, of having no crossing dependency lines, is basically a mathematical picture of the ancient grammatical principle of sannidhi. It's the same idea, just separated by centuries. How cool is that?
But hang on, because the story gets even more interesting. It turns out that sometimes crossing the lines is actually okay. The rules are more nuanced than that, because you see, not all grammatical relationships are created equal. Those ancient grammarians actually distinguish between 2 types of that syntactic hunger. First, there's uttita akanksha, or mutual expectancy. This is the unbreakable, ironclad bond between the core parts of a sentence, like a verb and its subject. They absolutely need each other. But then there's utapya akanksha, or unilateral expectancy. This is a one-sided optional bond, like between a noun and its adjective. A cow doesn't need an adjective to be a cow, but an adjective like white is pretty useless without a noun to describe.
And this awesome distinction leads to 2 kinds of rule breaking. A bad break violates that core mutual expectancy, and that's when you get a non-planar mess and total gibberish. But a good break that only bends the rule for an optional one-sided expectancy. It might make the sentence a little more complex, but it's still perfectly understandable. It just adds some stylistic flexibility.
So, does this theory actually hold up in the real world? To find out, researchers did a deep dive into one of the most famous Sanskrit texts of all time,
the poetic verses of the Bhagavad Gita. Because, let's face it, if anyone is going to bend the rules for the sake of art, it's going to be poets.
And what they found was fascinating. In the verses they analyzed, there were a whopping 300 instances of these sanity violations, these sentences with cross-dependency lines. Right away, that shows us that this rule-bending is pretty common in poetry, likely to fit the type constraints of meter and rhyme.
But this is the smoking gun. When they categorized those 300 violations, an overwhelming pattern jumped right out. Just look at this. About 64%, almost 2/3, of the rule bending involved those optional descriptive links like adjectives. Another 33% involved other non-correlations. And the absolutely essential core subject and object relationships, a tiny fraction. Only about 3% dared to mess with the grammatical spine of the sentence.
So what's the verdict? Well, that myth that Sanskrit's word order is completely free is officially busted. It's actually governed by these elegant ancient principles like sannidhi, which we can now see visually as planarity. The system is brilliantly flexible, but not arbitrarily so. It allows for creative freedom with descriptive optional elements, all while fiercely protecting the core grammatical structure of the sentence.
And that leaves us with a final thought to chew on. Sanskrit grammar isn't a rigid cage. It's a sophisticated framework that knows when to be strict and when it can afford to be flexible. So, if a language builds in a way for poetry to artfully bend the rules without ever breaking the meaning, what does that tell us about the really profound relationship between structure and creativity?